Good afternoon, and thank you for joining today's special presentation on plastic bags and the environment. My name is Stephen Acquario, and I am the Executive Director of the New York State Association of Counties, and will serve as your facilitator and moderator for today's presentation, Problems and Solutions for New York. Obviously, this is not a New York problem, not a New York situation, and is indeed applicable to all areas of the globe with no exception. But it is a pleasure to be here. The Association of Counties is a nearly 100-year-old association representing county governments in the state of New York. There are 57 counties and 5 boroughs in New York State, making up a total of 62 counties. And NYSAC has been working with its membership, some of which are interested in enacting local ordinances or local laws to regulate the use of plastic bags in our grocery stores and other retail establishments. Other presenters today will be William Rabbia, the Oneida-Herkimer Solid Waste Authority Executive Director, the Honorable William Spencer, Suffolk County Legislator, the Honorable Mona Golub, the Vice President of Public Relations and Consumer Services for Price Chopper Market 32, Jason Wadsworth, the Manager of Sustainability for Wegmans, and closing today's presentation is Mr. Gary Carrel, Solid Waste Recycling Specialist for Erie County Department of Environment and Planning. We intend to go about 60 to 70 minutes in total, and we will get through this as best we can to provide many different perspectives, ideas, questions, concerns as we work through this issue. I would encourage you on your box, on your computer screen, there should be a question box for you to type in and include questions. I would encourage you to include questions, comments, and concerns on the issue of the single-use plastic bag in that box and submit it to us. This is a very large forum. We have over 220 people from multiple states. All levels of government are represented on this call, federal, state, and local, and numerous environmental associations and advocates. So our intent is to capture your questions, comments, and concerns and structure that into a report which we will compile after the webinar is done. But some quick opening remarks. We are very much living in a single-use moment in the United States. K-cups for coffee, individual snacking and prepackaged meals. They're convenient, disposable, fresh, well, sort of, and they satisfy the immediate wants and needs of the human. These goods are often packaged in single-use film and carried away in single-use plastic bags. But in the midst of the single-use movement of convenience, there lurks a troubling undercurrent of concern for us humans and other inhabitants of the planet. What to do with all the plastic trash, and in particular today, the single-use plastic bag. Plastic trash, that's what we're talking about today. Single-use containers, bags, are tossed by humans with little concern or thought as to where they end up in our environment. They end up in our waters, our oceans. We've all heard by now of the Thai whale which died of a massive consumption of plastic. They end up in our landfills or blow around our environment, clogging up our water or wastewater drains. Our efforts as a society, collectively, our governments at all levels, consumers, manufacturers, and retail and grocery industry, all efforts need to continue on how to best collect and dispose of the plastic bags in our environment. Reducing the use of single-use bags and stressing the importance of reusable bags, that is the goal. The United States lags behind other countries when it comes to a national policy on plastic bags. North America is the only continent where no national policy on plastic bags has been introduced. In the United States, The regulations have been introduced mostly at the state, city, county, or a local government level. And in the United States, cities or states that have banned plastic bags, we've banned them more than Europe, Africa, and South America combined. In New York, the New York Governor, Andrew Cuomo, convened a task force in February of 2017. The members of that task force were the Department of Environmental Commissioner, Senator O'Mara, Assemblyman Steve Engelbright, who both serve as the environmental chairs of the legislative committees, the president of the New York League of Conservation Voters, the president of the Food Industry Alliance, and the executive director of the New York State Association of Counties, myself. The report analyzed the problems with plastic bags, how they were derived from fossil fuel, a source of litter, that they jam municipal recycling and wastewater processing equipment, that they were harmful to marine habitats and wildlife. And earlier this month, as I mentioned, a whale made international news when it died in southern Thailand after swallowing more than 80 plastic bags. The task force analyzed single-use bag reduction measures, statewide, national, and at the international level. And that analysis was recently amended and appended by the report of the United Nations, recently a report on single-use bags in June of 2018. The state's task force on plastic bags identified 8 courses of action. 1, to strengthen and enforce the existing Plastic Bag Reduce, Reuse, and Recycling Act. 2, make manufacturers responsible for recycling the single-use plastic bags. 3, impose a fee on single-use plastic bags. 4, impose a fee per transaction for single-use bags. 5, impose a fee on single-use plastic and paper bags. Number 6, ban single-use plastic bags. Number 7, ban plastic bags and impose a fee on the allowable alternatives, i.e. paper. And number 8, take no new action. There were other considerations that were put forth by New York State's Plastic Bag Task Force that had equal importance. Educational campaigns at the state and local level, statewide consistency, continued recycling of bags, disposition of fees should they be imposed, exemptions, for example, for low-income New Yorkers, phase-in period, a sunset provision. No single recommendation was provided. Recently, New York's largest county, Suffolk County, imposed a 5-cent fee on plastic bags, which went into effect on January 1st of 2018. And we have one of our legislators here, the sponsor of that bag, here to talk with us today. Other calls for a statewide ban have come from our governor, Andrew Cuomo, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio, Erie County Executive Mark Poloncarz, the Tompkins County Legislature, the Warren County Board of Supervisors discussing it, the Ulster County Legislature discussing it, the Madison County Board of Supervisors discussing it, the Westchester Board of Legislators discussing it. More than 50 nations around the world are taking action to reduce plastic pollution, says the United Nations, and the biggest report on single-use plastic so far was just released this week. With that said, I'd like to turn it over to Bill Rabbia. Bill will discuss the impact of operating a large landfill in central New York and what this means to the equipment, the municipal recycling facilities that are used to separate trash that is coming in and discarded into the landfill. Bill, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Steve. Can you hear me okay?
We can. Thank you.
Very good. So as Steve said, I want to thank you for having me on, Steve. And as Steve mentioned, I've been asked to provide the solid waste manager's perspective, if you will. And to begin, I'd like to just give you a little background about the Oneida-Herkimer Solid Waste Authority. So we own and operate a fully integrated solid waste management system that includes a 200-ton per day single stream recycling center, a number of solid waste transfer stations, a regional landfill, a green waste compost site, and household hazardous waste collection facility, and electronic recycling facilities. So next slide, please. Next slide, please. So I think that the New York State Plastic Bag Task Force report really did a good job summarizing the issues for us solid waste managers, and they really include the litter aspect of the blowing plastic film and plastic bags, recycling center operational difficulties, and obviously consumption of landfill airspace. As many of the attendees, I'm sure, are very well familiar with, all of these lead to significant expense, whether it be time, money, equipment, resources. Next slide, please. So I think these pictures here, and I'm glad to say these did not come from my landfill site, but they truly illustrate an extreme example of the litter problem related to single-use plastic bags and other plastic film. So we know these bags tend to not stay put. They act as kites. They fly great distances. These pictures here really show a trash screen or a litter fence that's around a landfill. And you can imagine the resources, equipment, and labor necessary to ultimately police up these bags. Us solid waste managers or material managers, our goal is to obviously recycle as much of this as we can. But if it comes to our solid waste facilities, obviously we need to dedicate time to clean that up. If it doesn't get caught in our litter fences, it'll get caught in trees, and you can imagine the effort needed to get it out of trees surrounding our facility. So related to recycling centers, plastic film leads to equipment downtime, mainly due to jamming or clogs in our system. And to avoid the downtime, we have to dedicate constant maintenance and cleaning to our screens. In Oneida-Herkimer, we, during our operating shift, we have 2 maintenance folks that get in the screens every morning break, afternoon break, and lunch break to clean plastic film from our screens. We also have our 3rd shift maintenance crew clean the screens prior to operating. While the screens, if they don't clog because you're throwing your maintenance guys in there to get the film out, while they're still operating, as plastic film wraps around your screens, it affects your sorting efficiency. If you look at these pictures, you can see star wheels or screen wheels, and the spacing between those wheels is really designed to allow containers or other commodity to drop through, fiber to move over the top. As they fill up, it affects your efficiency, and ultimately, if the plastic film's not captured around your wheels or sorted out, it'll end up contaminating your other recyclable commodities. I think the report did a good job sort of summarizing expenses across the board, and those expenses for recycling centers are really going to vary significantly based upon your throughput and your size. Next slide, please. So recycling markets, quality is our top priority in today's markets when you're operating a recycling center. I'm sure many of the attendees are familiar with China's new technical standards for contamination, tied to their National Sword and their Blue Sky initiatives. Most recycling centers are striving to keep prohibitives or contaminants under 0.5%, which is next to impossible with today's recycling streams coming in. So contamination is a huge issue. In order to establish a market, a favorable market, whether it's for plastic film or fiber or any other type of recyclable commodity, you need really 2 things. You need a decent quantity, and you need to prove quality and avoid contamination. Next slide, please. So plastic film recovered at MRFs. There's no real good way to sort plastic film out at your modern single-stream recycling facilities. So the plastic film, if recovered, tends to have very poor quality, and the contamination is not necessarily due to the MRF. It's due to the process of collecting it at the curb. It tends to be dirty, and in most cases, there's no market for it. Material managers are finding that source separation is truly key in order to be able to market plastic film. And once source separated, you need to make sure you keep it clean. Next slide, please. So many planning units or recycling centers in New York State tend to emphasize the current New York State Plastic Bag Reduction, Reuse, and Recycling Act, which is discussed in the task force report. Really, it's emphasized and the community is educated to facilitate the recycling and marketability. Most recycling centers will not accept plastic film as part of their single stream, but ultimately, due to the challenge with educating the public, we end up still receiving it. Oneida-Herkimer, we do not accept plastic film in our single stream, and we have an educational campaign to educate our residents to recycle plastic film through the retailers. We have a database, and we try to illustrate and educate them that it's if they're not going to use reusable grocery bags, bring your plastic film back to those retailers that do a good job recycling it. Next slide, please. So I want to thank Sue McIntyre. She's the Director of Solid Waste for Delaware County. They operate a single stream recycling center. And in Sue's case, they will actually take source separated film back for drop off at their convenience stations and at their MRF from their haulers. And she provided me with these pictures. I think it illustrates one issue with film is there's a storage issue with film. So Delaware County collects the source separated plastic film. They store it in these large gaylords or these super sacks, I'm sorry. And once they have enough, next slide, please. They will bale it. You can see the slide to the bottom of your screen has some bales of plastic film next to their incoming containers. Currently, they have no market for this. So as I mentioned earlier, your modern MRFs, when we are able to capture the film either through our single stream or we have folks drop it off, it tends to be contaminated and dirty, and we have very little luck being able to market it. Next slide, please. So really, in summary, at our transfer stations and landfill, those bags that folks choose not to recycle are a constant everyday litter problem. The plastic film markets require high quality. Source separation is definitely required for long-term markets. And although manufacturers are working diligently to come up with some new equipment to be able to handle plastic film at modern recycling centers, it's really not compatible with your modern MRFs. With that, Steve, I'll hand it back to you.
Hi, this is Patrick from Legislator Spencer's office. I'm actually getting the legislator up from his medical office. He's going to be speaking to you right now. If you don't mind just repeating that question one more time, I do apologize, and he'll be happy to answer for you, okay?
Okay, thank you.
All right.
There have been many counties, local governments in New York State, which have taken up the issue of either a ban. We have several towns and villages in Long Island, Westchester, some villages have taken up this issue of banning a plastic bag. In Ulster County, some villages in Westchester, a couple of towns in Suffolk as well. There have been a couple of initiatives of a fee. In Long Beach and Nassau County, New York, imposed a fee, and Suffolk County, one of the largest counties in the state of New York, imposed a 5-cent fee on plastic bags effective January 1st of 2018. Dr. Spencer, are you with us?
I am. Hi. Good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you for joining us. Legislator Bill Spencer, Dr. Spencer from Suffolk County, New York, the architect of the Suffolk County local law that addresses plastic bags. Legislator Spencer, can you tell us a little bit about your motive in addressing this? What was affecting your community, and how has this changed behavior, or what have you seen since January of 2018?
Certainly. First, I want to thank the New York State Association of Counties for hosting this webinar and allowing me the privilege of participating. It's been something as far as my legislative career, the awareness of the problems of plastic in our environment and the impacts that it has. My understanding is that there are more than 5 trillion pieces of plastic already floating in our oceans. And here in Suffolk, to help to address the issue, we wanted to, there's a lot of sources of plastics, be it the bottles or the straws, but one thing that really kind of came to mind is the number of times where people go in and out of a convenience store and will buy one item, a candy bar, an apple, and they'll put it in a plastic bag, and that plastic bag doesn't get recycled. It doesn't make it to the waste paper can. It gets, usually it flies out of their hands and floats and gets caught in our fences or streams. And this is so common. And I had a lot of constituents that, brought this issue to me. And one of the things, when you have a massive problem, you have to start somewhere. And I believe, there's always this balance of government, whether or not it's government overreach, but I think we have a responsibility to lead, to set an example. So looking at this problem and working with our environmentalists, they kind of helped me understand the scope of the problem. And then as I started to do more research, reaching out to our schools, our educators, our business sector, our labor community, it seemed to be something that there was a common agreement that this was a big problem. And really the issue became, how do we take something that there is a significant community need, and then how do we overcome the political process to be able to do something that's successful. So that was kind of the start of the process, and we really came to the conclusion there was really a great need for us to do something. I can talk.
Dr. Spencer, let's talk for a minute about, this is Steve Acquario. I'm the Executive Director of the State Association of Counties, representing all the counties in New York State. I commend you for taking action to address the issue. There's no wrong way or right way to address this, but there is a way, and you have taken that upon yourself and those of your colleagues on the Suffolk County Legislature and the County Executive of Suffolk, Steve Bellone, for signing that local law. Let's talk for a minute about what that local law does. Does the local law impose a fee? And if so, where do the proceeds of that fee go to?
Okay. Well, I think initially starting out, the preference, and we saw a lot of our smaller villages and towns had passed laws that just did a straight out ban for plastic bags, and which then allowed paper. And although papers is better as far as its ability to be able to biodegrade, still, as far as the carbon footprint, we were hoping if we were going to drive behavior, we wanted to drive behavior towards reusable bags. So what my particular law, and the reason, as I went through the process of bringing environmentalists together with the business community and with colleagues in the legislature, both on the right and the left, one of the concerns with a straight out ban was the utility that plastic bags may pose when they're needed, but also that a straight out ban would be such a shock for the businesses that I couldn't get the support. I couldn't get the votes to do a straight out ban. But sometimes you have to get lucky. And so we went with the 5-cent fee after getting a consensus and realizing that I could get the support. We have a slight Democratic edge in Suffolk County, but this turned out to be a bipartisan effort. So we initiated a bill that charged 5 cents for a plastic bag and 5 cents for a paper bag. Now, the reason we came to 5 cents was 5 cents wasn't an exorbitant charge, but it was still enough of a reminder that there was a cost associated with these bags. And to get to this conclusion, it was months and months and months of research, reaching out to not only other municipalities in the United States, but finding out what they had done around the world. In some places, they charge as much as $1 for a bag. But once we settled on the 5 cents fee, because a regular plastic bag costs about 2.5 cents, a paper bag costs about 8 cents. What we did, and this is where we were lucky, because as a county, when we impose that fee, we don't have the authority to direct that money to be used for a particular source or to come to the legislature, because only the state can do that. So it turns out that the 5 cent fee goes to the stores, and that was the biggest criticism. But here's the logic. The money goes to the stores, but the stores typically only have about a 1% margin in retails. So the price of the bag is already baked into the cost of doing business. So when we charge the 5 cent fee, it teases out that cost, and it doesn't change the cost early on. But when one store tries to raise its prices, it has to be in relationship to their other stores, or otherwise they're going to not be competitive. So the stores didn't really get so big of a windfall short term. But here is really what was very important. It turns out the 5 cent fee going to the stores was the most successful part of the legislation, because that drove public outrage. and I can laugh now at the time, but what we discovered was that people called and they were so upset that the money went to the store. And here's the example. If I walk into a pharmacy and I buy a candy bar and they ask if I want to donate $1 for Save the Children, the vast majority of people will donate that $1 because it's for a good cause. Well, in the stores, if the 5 cents were going to Save the Harbor Fund, well, I think that sometimes that doesn't change the use as well, because you pay the 5 cents and you feel good, like I'm doing it for a good cause. the bill worked better than my wildest imagination because of probably the outrage that the money went to the stores. People decided, no, forget it. I don't want it to go to the stores. And we saw within 3 or 4 months, 80% reduction in plastic bag use. We saw plastic bag use go, and we did this. There was a scientific poll that we did before and after the bill went into effect, and we saw reusable bag use go up from 5 to 50%, and we saw the use of plastic bags drop from 70 to 35%. So it worked better because the money was kept by the stores.
Dr. Spencer, I greatly appreciate the time that you've given us here today. I understand you are pressed for time. We've had several questions come in while you have been speaking. You have been answering them. Coincidentally, some of the questions that have come in, like measuring the success of this law. I know that when I read the law a couple of months back, I recall an expiration date or a sunset for the county to evaluate the effectiveness of this local law at that time, and the county at that time would consider whether or not to ban the bag should the reduction not have been proven. But it sounds like you're off to a great start, and we wish you much success. One quick question that did come in, I don't believe you mentioned, is the enforcement of the law. We have one of our listeners asking how the county is enforcing the local law.
Certainly. Well, the biggest part of making this law work was having a period of time that we had to do an educational campaign before it went into effect. So we put together a committee of what we call our 5 and 5 committee to kind of help us do education, to do the scientific studies. We had students that went out and measured how many bags were being consumed, but also part of this committee, we had the Department of Health, who was tasked with the enforcement. And so, number one, we wanted to, before we could do any enforcement, we needed to make sure everyone knew it was going to happen. And we ran ads in the newspapers, we reached out to stores, we worked with, we had a representative on our 5 and 5 group, bag group that represented the retailers. But one of the things that once the bill went into effect, we did have a grace period before we started imposing fines. Now, we didn't advertise the grace period because we felt that there perhaps this would lead people not to comply. And the grace period is now ending. I think that we are going to start to enforce where if we see people stores not following the law, that they will be cited. But having that educational and that transitional period and the grace period was, I think, really important. It makes it easy. It's impossible to enforce with limited staff all the stores, so it is by typically someone reporting that there's an issue, and then the health department will go out and investigate. But I think this was the right way to do it because it didn't hit retailers over the head. It gave them a chance to become used to the law, and now it seems to be a lot easier.
Dr. William Spencer, we've been talking with a county legislator in Suffolk County, New York. I'd like to thank you, Dr. Spencer. I know that you have to run, and we appreciate your time with the counties of New York here today. Thank you, Dr. William Spencer.
Well, I'd like to thank you all, and again, it's so important. I was a small part of this, but really the plastic bag task force that worked on this played a big role. It's important to have all stakeholders come to the table. It's important to be patient. But in the end, I feel it was one of the best things that we could do that is tangible, that we can see the difference. And the last thing I'll say is that we did have retailers who kind of stepped up to participate. IKEA donated 5,000 plastic bags, that reusable bags that we could distribute to those who were in perhaps senior citizen homes, those that may have difficulty paying for reusable bags. I purchased bags. So really the education and having people understand what you're doing, and the community steps up and supports you, and it's a win-win for everyone. So thank you.
Dr. William Spencer, thank you. I'll note that IKEA did recently announce a complete withdrawal and use of the plastic bag by 2020 on a voluntary basis. We've been talking with the Honorable William Spencer, the Suffolk County Legislator and prime sponsor of the Suffolk County local law imposing a fee to sort of change a behavioral economics, a piece of legislation in Suffolk County, New York, and Long Island, New York, and already reporting a positive effect on the use of single-use bags, and that there was a recent opinion editorial in Newsday, which is Long Island's newspaper, on April 22nd of 2018, which does contain some of the statistics Dr. Spencer mentioned. Let's go to the industry side of this. I'd like to thank the food merchants of New York that I have had the great pleasure of working with, and in particular, two of them that are with us here today. First, we're going to speak with Mona Golub, who also served as a county legislator in Suffolk, or Schenectady County, New York, excuse me. Mona is, of course, the Vice President of Public Relations and Consumer Services for Price Chopper Market 32, a very large grocery chain, if you will, in New York and other states as well, and also has dedicated herself and company-wide a large part of time and effort to address the use of the single-use bag of its consumers. And I'd like to thank and welcome Mona Golub to talk about the efforts of Price Chopper Market 32. Mona.
Well, thank you, Steve, and good afternoon, everyone. Calling New York State home since 1932, Price Chopper and Market 32 have 134 stores in 6 northeastern states, some of which have been impacted by bag ban legislation, others by bag fee legislation. And several of the communities in which we operate are currently exploring their options, albeit in slightly different ways. As such, I really appreciate the opportunity to meet with you and shed some light on a few components of the issue that haven't received as much exposure or discussion as they deserve. And given the integral role that we play in executing any type of bag legislation, we believe it's imperative that government, retail, environmental advocates, and consumers work together on this issue in pursuit of its noble intent. Let me be perfectly clear in stating that Price Chopper Market 32 is committed to reducing the number of disposable bags in the waste stream, and we recognize that we have helped to facilitate their proliferation. In our eyes, both thin film single-use plastic and handleless paper bags are disposable. And though we've been encouraging and measuring reuse and recycling for more than 20 years through rebate and recycling programs, heavy-duty bag discounts and promotions, and consumer education, the bottom line is that fewer than 10% of our customers are currently using heavy-duty reusable bags, boxes, or totes. Now, we know this because unlike most of our competitors, we give a 3-cent rebate for every heavy-duty reusable brought back to our store, and can therefore measure the percentage that do versus the percentage that don't. So what will it take to engage the other 90% of the communities in which we operate? What will it take to discourage their reliance on disposable bags and encourage them to transition to heavy-duty reusables? Perhaps getting rid of disposable bags altogether is the ultimate solution, but it's a pretty heavy lift, particularly if the key stakeholders aren't working together. We have a store in Great Barrington, Massachusetts that passed a bag ban about 5 years ago. The selectmen in this town assumed that those of us who supply customers with disposable bags would be adversarial, so they chose not to include us in the dialogue about their proposed ban until a couple of weeks before it was voted on. At the annual town meeting, the ban on thin film single-use plastic bags was voted into law by 70 residents. The rest of the town read about it in the paper the next morning. Now, it was at this point that the town leadership began to recognize the sincerity of our offer to participate in the planning and eventual rollout of the campaign. And so after the vote, government, retailers, customers, and environmental advocates came together to figure out the intricacies of moving that needle. Implementation of the law was twice delayed because of the positive momentum that was created by the building of this campaign. A town logo promoting heavy-duty reusables was designed by local high school students. It was printed on flyers that were posted in the windows of all businesses in town, small, medium, and large. We reproduced it on signage echoing the call to bring heavy-duty reusables to our store that we affixed to our cart corrals, the light poles in our parking lot, and on our store facade. And a local media campaign was coordinated to educate about the law, outline the heavy-duty options that were available, and put into context the countdown until the law went into effect. Though the result was inevitable, the campaign invited the public discussion and participation that had been somewhat contained before the proposed legislation was passed. Now, granted, this planning came after the law was passed, but it was clear that the process, which brought key stakeholders together, had merit. A few of the concerns that came up then and continue to surface: paper bags, for one. The presumption that paper bags will replace thin film plastic ones is a fallacy. Paper bags are neither environmentally nor financially sustainable. The carbon footprint behind their production and distribution is wholly inefficient and wreaks havoc on our forests. And despite popular myth, paper is more costly to recycle than plastic, and it doesn't biodegrade easily in landfills, given their inherent lack of oxygen. The consumer-facing profile of paper bags is no more compelling. Fewer than 1% of our customers ask for paper bags today. And let's be honest, they're difficult to carry. They rip easily, even more easily when wet, and they rarely get used a second time. The reality is that handleless paper bags are as disposable as thin film single-use plastic ones, and they're not customer-friendly, which is essentially why they went out of style 40 years ago. Oh, and did I mention that they cost 3 times as much as thin film plastic bags? So why even think to stage their comeback, much less elevate their lot in life? Slightly thicker plastic bags are not a long-term solution either. They're just fancier versions of disposable bags. And isn't the point of bag legislation to discourage reliance on disposable bags and to encourage the use and reuse of heavy-duty reusable alternatives? Another concern that requires more discussion is how bag legislation will incorporate WIC and SNAP recipients. How do we ensure that they are equipped with the bags they need to comply with the law just like everyone else? Surely we retailers can't be expected to give out new heavy-duty reusable bags to them every time they come to the store. And by law, SNAP recipients can't be stigmatized by receiving a disposable bag that's been banned for everyone else. Why don't retailers and New York State government talk about how My Benefits or the new e-WIC swiper card technology might be able to incorporate the value of heavy-duty bags at cost? A third concern relates to the patchwork legislation that's so talked about, that while driven by noble intent, creates unevenness on the competitive landscape, pitting counties one against another, sending residents who aren't ready to comply to the next county over, and forcing competitive strategy on bag pricing on top of everything else. Clearly, statewide legislation that ensures a level playing field would go a long way toward resolving this concern. Like many within our channel, we've offered and discounted heavy-duty reusables for more than a decade. And the truth is that the percentage of customers using them has not increased significantly in recent years, despite all of our elements of engagement. The rebate, recycling bins in all of our stores, which collect to recycle the equivalent of 50% of what we give out, and the fact that our bags are recycled into composite planks for decking and park benches. Our regular promotional offers on the bags themselves, and the educational engagement we extend in the form of events, signage, both inside and outside of our stores, blogs, and other social media outreach. Clearly, staying the course is not the solution. Unlike many retailers, we are not opposed to bag bans like the ones with which we comply in Western Mass. But given that 90% of the community must change its behavior in order to comply, we believe that a fee program is a good way to jumpstart progress and leverage behavioral change in the right direction. A fee program is less about collecting nickels than it is about discouraging reliance on disposable bags and encouraging conversion to whichever long-term solution best suits the customer, presumably one that will last and not require any additional investment for years. And as people convert to heavy-duty reusables, the trajectory of these nickels being collected will diminish over time. We're motivated not by the nickels, but rather by the opportunity to neutralize our investment in disposable waste. Any portion of the nickel revenue beyond what we use to purchase, warehouse, distribute, collect, and recycle the bags we provide would be invested in three things. One, the continuation of the 3-cent per bag rebate that we offer for each and every reusable bag brought back to our store. Two, the discounting of heavy-duty bags in an effort to encourage behavioral change. And three, the growing cost of waste and energy management systems, recycling, fresh recovery, and other sustainable initiatives that make us good corporate citizens. So if a bag fee legislation like the Suffolk County law that Dr. Spencer just spoke about, or the one in Long Beach can decrease disposable bag usage by 50% or more, then who's to say that it might not be the most significant way to move a community forward? Public discussion about the logic of reuse and recycling, the various heavy-duty reusable options, how to transition the way we transport the products we buy, what the environmental benefits are, how the capacity and cost of managing local landfills could improve, might help to shape a collective goal. It might even enhance civic pride. In the meantime, Price Chopper Market 32 will continue to request a voice in this dialogue, not only as a key stakeholder that will be relied upon to execute whatever legislation is passed, but as an involved party that has experience and insight to offer, and most importantly, as an engaged neighbor and corporate citizen that wants to be a part of the solution. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share these few thoughts with you today.
Mona Golub, thank you very much for again, the dedication of Price Chopper Market 32 in this area, for educating the consumers in your stores and in the communities, and the contribution that you make towards bringing about a solution towards this issue as we go forward. I'd like to bring in another member of the industry, Jason Wadsworth, the Manager of Sustainability for Wegmans, which is largely existing in the western central part of New York State, and to talk about the efforts of Wegmans and their thoughts on the single-use plastic bag. Jason, are you with us? He's self-muted.
Thank you very much for including me. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Jason. Thanks for joining us. So what's the take of Wegmans on what's been happening with this issue? How is the store chain, the industry itself, responding to the environmental concerns? You posted some recycling numbers that were pretty high last I saw, and sort of contrary to some of the statistics that were put out in the state report about the amount of bags that were being recycled in this area. What's going on with Wegmans?
So we've been committed to making a difference in all of the communities that we serve. We think that recycling is one of the ways that we can continue to engage our community and make it a better place. We feel, like Mona had so effectively put, with paper bags, that they are not the solution. We can't go backwards to a paper bag society. All the resources that go into making paper bags, transporting paper bags, I think we're all in agreement there, and the New York State Task Force cited that as well. We believe that the issue of plastic bag litter has a solution. and that not enough effort has been put into recycling of plastic bags. I think there is a lot more that can be done to go along with the voluntary recycling program that we have in New York State, where we're supposed to provide outlets for recycling at retail. We think that there's even more that can be done with that law before jumping straight to a ban or a tax or a fee. Since 2012, well, since 1994, Wegmans has been recycling plastic bags, but in 2012, we introduced our post-consumer recycled plastic bag made of 40% recycled content, all of which comes from material that customers are returning to our stores, in addition to material that we are collecting in the back rooms from stretch wrap and shrink wrap. That is sent to our bag manufacturer and kept separate and turned right back into Wegmans bags instead of going to plastic decking or lumber, which it used to. We believe this is a step in the right direction to create a market for the recycled content, as well as keep that out of our communities and neighborhoods. We think that education to consumers is what is needed. We continue to try to educate on the benefits of reusable bags, which we believe is the best way that you can curb single or plastic bag use. We believe that if folks are not using those reusable bags for their intended purpose, that is actually worse than both paper bags and plastic bags put together. So we feel the need to really educate folks about continued reuse of reusable bags, as well as the downsides of paper bags. Frankly, this is a litter issue, and we should be educating about, proper disposal, and in this case, proper recycling of bags at retail. We wholeheartedly agree that curbside recycling is not the place. Municipalities would tell you that they don't want the bags in their curbside recycling. And we have an opportunity as communities and as municipalities to educate our consumers and customers about the proper location for plastic bag placement. We think that the litter that is occurring is inadvertent. We don't believe that anyone wakes up in the morning saying we're going to litter today. We think it's strictly an education issue and availability of recycling issue. That is our viewpoint. Mona very effectively articulated a lot of similar positions with Wegmans.
Jason Wadsworth, the manager of sustainability for Wegmans, thank you again for making a contribution to this important environmental issue. Let's go to Gary Carrel. This is, again, something, there are many levels of government and industry involved in this. We have manufacturers of the plastic bag. We have the retailers and the grocery stores that are packaging the products into these bags. We have local government acting in the environmental best interests of their communities, state governments addressing this issue through banning or feeing in some particular cases. Gary Carrel is the solid waste recycling specialist for New York's largest upstate county, Erie County, and works in the Department of Environment and Planning. Gary, you've had some success in your community. Let's talk for a few minutes about what is Erie County doing to educate its residents about the single-use plastic bag.
All right, thank you very much. Before I start, I did want to acknowledge our Deputy Commissioner, Bonnie Lawrence. Bonnie originally worked on this presentation and has presented before NYSAC. And was not able to be here today, so I'm doing this in her stead. So next slide. I just wanted to note how we got to this point, and basically it was an annual report that our Environmental Management Council does in 2015, and they put this issue out there as one of the concerns, and especially to do with litter. And the impact on the environment. And then our county executive, next slide, read the report and decided to include it in his 2016 State of the County report. So with that impetus, the Department of Environment and Planning was then contacted by a variety of groups, including our local zoo, the Buffalo Zoo, River Keepers, now Water Keeper, Sierra Club, all with interest in getting involved in trying to reduce plastic bag usage. So we got this group together, basically formed the coalition, whose name became the BYO coalition, because we did believe that looking at bags was only one part of this, and as everyone has heard, you know, this continues to be an issue, and as Stephen mentioned, you know, we're single-use plastic crazy, so our goal is to move on beyond this. And next slide, please. And again, with, you know, somewhat of the same issues we've been hearing, we looked at the best way to get the word out, and really reduction, that, you know, reduce, reuse, recycle, reduction being number one. So, and there was so much going on, as was noted, the ban or the fee in New York City, and then the task force. So there were so many different moving pieces. This group decided they were just going to focus on outreach and education about bringing your own bag. Next slide, please. Okay. So this was the start. We started it with the hashtag Erie BYObag, and that's our county executive and the former executive director of the Buffalo Zoo. We did a press conference. We released this. That is Tara, a polar bear made out of 3,000 plastic bags, and that represents approximately 2 families of 4. 2 families of 4 would use a year, 3,000 bags. And we tried to use her. We moved her around, although she's not that portable. And then the zoo, they have a sign that encourages people to take a selfie with Tara and post it on the hashtag. Next slide, please. And if you notice there, we did utilize one of Wegmans. I don't know if you can tell on the screen there, but we had met with several of the local retailers to get their take on this, and so certainly Wegmans has been a big sponsor, a big supporter, including providing us with reusable bags that we did a giveaway one year. And we have extensive information on our website. The Erie County Environmental Management Council, 2 years in a row now, have taken out some ads around Earth Day promoting this issue. We did a number of events, and then also, you know, again, using the hashtag and social media, believing that that's one of the best ways to get people's attention. Next slide, please. So you can see ultimately what started out small became quite a significant large group of people meeting. And this also branched out into this group wrote a grant, and we received a grant from NYPTY to take this issue into the schools, and I'll mention that a little bit later. So that's part of this coalition. But one of the members of this coalition, right in the center, the Matt Urban Hope Center, they're a group that serves homeless people, and they contacted us and said that they were very disturbed about this particular individual, about the fact that every week they give out items, you know, to the homeless, and they give them out in plastic bags. And this coordinator decided to try to do something about it. She found this on YouTube where you can take a T-shirt and turn it into a bag. So that actually became our sort of our signature event. We have now done this at a variety of places where we'll have the booth, we'll have a selfie frame with the Erie BYObag, and people can make their own bags. And so this really came fully out of this coalition, you know, coming up with the idea. And then since then, there's been other groups that have taken this and run with it. One of our local municipalities, their conservation committee, they did a T-shirt drive in the local schools, and then they supported or came up with giving away the bags and having people make their T-shirt bags out of at the local farmers market. So this is really, this idea has taken on, and you know, who doesn't have an old T-shirt that they can't wear anymore but would like to keep? And or we have also found that organizations, races. Once the race is over, nobody wants those t-shirts, so they're great to do. We worked with a group of seniors who has pre-cut the shirts for us. That way it happens quicker when you're at these events. So this has been a great way to get our word out, to get the word out, be at these different events, you know, be there and just talk about bring your own bag. And then if the next slide, the other thing that was done at the same time was we worked with BOCES class and again with the Buffalo Zoo with student videos. And I think it's the slide just before this. Students in this class that was at the Buffalo Zoo, they made a video about about the need to use your own bags. And so I would suggest everyone, if you go to this erie.gov/BYObag, you can see a lot of this stuff I'm talking about, including these student videos, which are really great. And again, all we did was give them the information. We didn't tell them one way or another what to do. We simply provided the information and they came up with the video. So that was great. Next slide, please. So, okay, so here is what the in the community events I was talking about. There's our hashtag frame, your selfie frame, and it's hard to tell in that picture, and I had trouble putting a different picture in, but the bag is on her right shoulder, and that's just a bag made out of a t-shirt. This was last summer at Elmwood Festival for the Arts, a big arts festival. We easily went through about 400 t-shirts over a 2-day period, giving these bags out, and took countless of these pictures and had them posted on Twitter or whatever happens there, which I'm not fully familiar with, but a really tremendous outreach opportunity. Next slide. So this is the other program I was talking about that through the grant of the New York State Pollution Prevention Institute. We, again, with using that, a lot of the members of the coalition, there was a program created. The study guides were made. There was a program where the teachers came in for a day-long presentation. If any of you have heard Sam Mason from SUNY Fredonia, she gives a tremendous presentation on these issues. I think one of my favorites is she mentions that they're finding plastic in much of our water, which means when we drink a beer, we're also drinking some of this plastic, and that seems to get people's attention. This particular program, really, it gets the word out into the kids, into the students, into the homes. So we found that this was really a tremendous success. It ended with a 1-month display of, and that's the next slide, please, of some of this artwork. It was absolutely amazing. I don't know if you can see that, but the shark on the bottom is, the plastic bag shark, the new terror of the ocean. But some of the kids, such creativity that comes out of these classes, and again from K to 12, beautiful stuff. Next slide, please. So again, we know there's a lot to be done as far as legislation, what's going to happen locally or statewide, but our bottom line was to educate people and push on this issue of bring your own bag. I mean, that's really the bottom line. Plastic, paper, it doesn't matter, just bring your own. And that's really the message that this coalition has really grabbed onto and has had some impact in the community. And thanks a lot for this opportunity.
Greatly appreciate the work of Erie County Executive polling cars, the work of the department itself, Erie County Department of Environment and Planning. And I want to thank all of our speakers here today. A special thank you to Bill Rabbia, Legislator Bill Spencer, Mona Golub from the Price Chopper Market 32 Corporation, Jason Wadsworth, Gary Carrel, for all the presentations. And we encourage our members, many of which that are with us here today, to talk about this issue. We're not calling for counties to individually pass a ban on plastic bags. We're not individually calling on members to feed the issue of a paper or a plastic bag, but we are encouraging the members to talk about it, to discuss the environmental impact, the recycling efforts of our landfills, and what happens with the single-use bag and the single-use movement that we're underway with. NYSAC thinks the following are essential components of any solution. One, it should be a statewide response. It's simpler, it's cleaner. Short of this, local governments should retain authority to protect their communities and work with their business community on a solution. Better education regarding the environmental impact of plastics in our environment, plastic bags, plastic straws, as well as the importance of reusable bags and recycling. As was discussed today throughout this webinar, reusable bags and the use of reusable bags and recycling, we have a much better job to do as a society. Continued recycling efforts through the New York State Plastic Bag Reduction, Reuse, and Recycling Act, and working with our food merchants throughout the state to accomplish that. A portion of any fee, should government impose fees, should support municipal recycling facilities to invest in technology to help source separate plastics out of landfills. Local education efforts like those underway in Erie County, and a portion of the fees should of course support merchants to assist with implementation of any new laws. NYSAC also thinks that there should be a phase out of single-use plastics by 2020. IKEA recently committed to this. And finally, the use of biodegradable, compostable bags, which we believe is on the verge of being introduced into the market, currently being offered and used in Sweden. We look forward to working with the State Department of Environmental Conservation and the counties and the food industry on the use of biodegradable, compostable bags, not just for industrial compostable standards, but also for HOME or home compost bags. After hearing all of these diverse perspectives, there are still several hundred of you that are on the line right now. We would ask that, because you're all with us here today, to again send us your questions, comments, concerns in the box of questions that is there. But also, I'd like to start a quick poll before we adjourn here today. So let's activate a poll here, and we're going to ask a question. What legislative action do you support to reduce single-use plastic bag consumption? So the first question, and we'll have 3 questions on a poll today, and we'll include the results of these. What legislative action do you support to reduce single-use plastic bag consumption? Can we activate that poll? Okay, that poll is now open. And thank you again for taking the time to complete this. We will again incorporate all the question, comments, and concerns that you have sent here today, as well as the webinar poll results in a report that we will post on our website, www.nysac.org. Okay, let's close that poll. Okay, I'm going to open up another question, the second of 3 poll questions. Next, let's activate the next poll. Would you support a fee on single-use plastic bags? And let's take responses to that poll. Okay, let's close that poll. And last and finally, let's activate this last question. Which level of government should regulate single-use plastic bag consumption? And this will be the final poll question for today's webinar. Which level of government should regulate single-use plastic bag consumption? Federal, state, local. I do not support regulations on single-use bags or other. Again, the results of these poll questions will be posted on our website, in addition to the other questions, comments, and concerns that were reported in on this webinar. Again, my name is Stephen Acquario, State Director of the New York State Association of Counties. I want to again thank our panelists that were with us here today, Bill Rabbia from the Oneida-Herkimer Solid Waste Authority, Bill Spencer, Suffolk County Legislature, Mona Golub, the Vice President of Public Relations and Consumer Services for Price Chopper Market 32, Jason Wadsworth from Wegmans, and Gary Carrel from Erie County's Department of Environment and Planning. That will conclude today's session. Thank you again for making a difference in our community.